so fine. Only spent a little time with you. Now I just can't get you off of my mind. 'Cause you are beautiful and it's spoiled. I've never seen your lights before. Whatever the indisposition, be sure.
Some of the sights and sounds of the Garrison that have made this such an historic place, and certainly a place that holds special memories for many Barbadians, including Sophia Lewis. Hello, I'm Sherwood McCaskey, welcoming you to Our Heritage, Sophia's beloved Garrison. In this special program, Sophia will walk us through her master's thesis, which crystallized her love for the Garrison.
Before I go to sleep, I think it's only fair to tell you.
When it came a time to choose what I was going to look at for the research paper, straight away it was the Garrison, my old stomping ground. And in fact, we are now standing at the house where I grew up. At the time it was called Cherry Tree Cottage, but now it is the cadet headquarters, as you can see, for the, attached to the Defense Force. You can imagine growing up at Cherry Tree Cottage. You see where the garden is, a little change now, but it felt like the whole Garrison Savannah was our garden and our lawn. This is what we looked at. And that passion stays because as a young child growing up, you could explore everything. Everybody that grew up here felt a belonging. You know, there were people playing basketball, there were people playing rugby, all kinds of things. At the time, we did also overlook Block C, which was not town and country planning at the time. It was not renovated, so it was just another place we could explore. Since then, as you can see, a number of changes have taken place over the 25 years.
But exactly what was Sophia seeking to call attention to as she worked on her thesis?
At the time, I was very much interested in creating some awareness, about the area and the events that had taken place here. Looking more deeply at the horse racing, looking more deeply at even cricket and the military. I thought that the wider Barbados didn't really consciously take in the whole complex, that they did see the savannah and they have a relationship with the savannah because of that horse racing and because of the walking and the sport and the recreation, but they weren't considering the whole complex as part of the Barbadian heritage. And I thought that my paper would help to create that awareness. And even though elements of that are there, I found that the paper took another direction.
Well, through Sophia's research, she has shown equally the democratization process that resulted through the many events that took place here at the Garrison.
And as you can see, the title is looking at the democratization process that took place at the Barbados Garrison, and what came out to was that it was more of a private space that has now transformed into a public arena. There was actually, from what I found out and from what I observed, two forms of private space. You have the first one dealing with the military and the army base up against civilians, and after the British Army leaves in 1905 at the turn of the century, you've got the upper white Barbadian elite coming in, and you can see the formation of the various clubs. You've got the Turf Club, the Aquatic Club, of course the Barbados Yacht Club, the Savannah Club that was housed in the main guard, and you see this development. Now what is interesting is that even with the military base at the turn when the British soldiers are arriving, they're coming to a place that is tropical, sun. They need to find a way to survive in this kind of condition, and so the civilians have to come in because they need. So in actual fact, I learned very quickly that it was not so that they blocked out the civilians. Civilians were allowed in, and they were coming from the enslaved group, who were artisans and people shoeing the horses, blacksmiths, cooks, and so on. So they're very much a part of the area.
Sophia points to what she considers to be an unwritten charter that seemingly governs the entire area here, and one which is in effect more so during horse racing events.
The space was, in a sense, always a public arena, but the elitism is an intangible set of rules and racial segregation. So even though at horse racing you have white and, the white community and the black community here, you will find that the white community is in the stands, the owners of horses, whereas the black community are here as well, but they're the grooms, they're maybe the audience. So there's a separation of the group. Same space, public arena, but separated by an intangible concept of racial and class stratification.
Well, of course, every good piece of research draws from the resources of many. To strengthen her assertion, Sophia draws from the research of a UWI historian and writer.
Professor Aviston Downs, in one of his pieces on leisure spaces in Barbados, also makes the point that the white elite would have used this kind of exposure to civilize the black community. They would have taken this to show that how you should live and the kind of attitudes and they should have by being exposed to the dressing, how they dressed, how they arrived. And this solidified the image that the elite way was the natural order and the natural way of things.
Of note would be one of the more striking points of Sophia's research, that is the move away from being a private space to that of being now a public space enjoyed by all.
And I chose 6. I looked at the whole continuous line of horse racing to show where we have arrived today. From that intangible separation of race and class to a point where we all can now go and use the stands, and everyone shares the space today in horse racing.
Benton wins it, Melia Secret, Somersault, Astral King.
I then looked at the West India Regiment, looking at the first black soldiers. And again, even though they are in the military complex, because of the British format of stratification, they are still not considered equal. Yet, they feel a cut above the rest of the black Barbadian community, mirroring and almost perhaps mimicking what they had seen within the British setup. I had a look too at things that, although not necessarily pointing to democratization, but showing the continuity and tradition. I've included even the prostitutes who work at Bush Hill, because that is a tradition that is 300 from they were men in 1780 forming the force, there were women. I looked at cricket because perhaps this is one of the strongest, makes the strongest point, because it speaks to our identity. And in actual fact, the first class test match was played on this garrison. Cricket may have been played publicly in homes, but the first cricket match took place on this garrison in the West Indies. And therefore, as we know, what it came to mean to Barbadians. And it was a way for black players by the turn of the century to start getting visibility and to start earning. And we know where West Indies cricket went. And it started right here. Fabulous to know that this too is the place where Sir Garfield Sobers was knighted. This is unusual, but because they took into consideration that they wanted the people of Barbados to be there and to witness that, she came to the garrison to knight a son. As you know too, he grew up in the Bayland. This was part of the stomping ground. And I've also heard that Sir Everton Weekes played here through the Defence Force. So it has produced worthy sons.
Worthy sons who have gone on to write the name of Barbados on history's page. Now, speaking about history's page, somewhere in this garrison is to be found a very sacred spot. For it was on that spot that Barbados symbolically became a nation in 1966. Sophia's thesis calls attention to that spot.
That statement alone should protect this area.
Indeed.
That statement alone means that this ground really cannot be touched. And that is the symbol of exactly that democratization, that it is now an area used by all Barbadians. White, black, young, old. It invites our visitors. It is navigated by all the different recreations. We have basketball, we have the rugby, as I've said, horse racing on Saturday. All of these things can happen together without conflict. Peter Lorre observed, and wrote about this in a column of his, that the garrison has no signs that prohibit anybody from doing anything on it. And that is a beautiful feeling. And in a time where now we are being told what you can do, what you mustn't, it is a space that allows you to walk your dogs, play your games. Everybody gets on. People don't encroach on the other's space. There are joggers, there are walkers, there are limers, there are school children going home, there is traffic going through, and all use it harmoniously. And this is very important. That is the equilibrium of the garrison that you don't want to change. There is no problem with change if it's going to work and if it's going to be effective, but if the thing is working harmoniously in a time of turbulence, let it be. And what is special about this garrison, and it's true, when one talks of the garrison, I suppose you do center on the savannah. And I will get back to the actual cultural heritage of the garrison, but when you think that this is on the borderline of a city, of Bridgetown, where there is, congestion and traffic, and that this space still allows you a ring of peace, it's fantastic, because we know that more and more of these peaceful areas are deteriorating. I will just say, if you go to the beach, you may have a motorcycle careering through, noise. And I'm not saying that you don't get motorcycles coming through the garrison, but there is still, once you are in there, you feel a certain peace and quiet, which is important in today's Barbados. And that is why I feel so much for the area.
Well, Sophia, a number of beautiful buildings surround the garrison. We're standing now outside of Geneva. I'm told this one has a very interesting story.
Yes, it was the military hospital for the complex. After having moved, it was moved to Geneva from where the tennis courts, the Savannah Club tennis courts used to be, which would be just, a little bit down from the actual main guard and in front of Stafford House. It is a beautiful old building, and it has gone through, it's on its original foundation. There are the foundations of the original home, but obviously there have been some modifications since that time. What is maybe important to think about with these buildings is that they have been there when most of us have come and gone. And in a silent way, this may be a little romantic, they witnessed that independence.
Yes.
And within their fabric are the stories of Barbadians gone by. They stand here and they look onto the happenings. And what is maybe sad about that is that when I spoke to Barbadians with the various interviews I carried out, many of them don't take the buildings into their consciousness. They really see the savannah because they know they use it, but they don't. And I asked them questions like, if, these buildings have been hit by hurricanes in the past. In 1831, there was a terrible one, and many of them were damaged. I asked, if a hurricane came now and took these buildings away, how would you feel? Would you recognize that would we rebuild them in Barbados, or would we be happy now to have land again to build hotels or condos? I've asked Barbadians as well, if we needed this space, if they came and said we could get money from this savannah, let's use it as land. Would we let them take it? We've already discussed that it was a place of independence, and so the question is, how important is the whole area to our identity and the things that these buildings have witnessed? Now, the other interesting feature, of course, is the architectural side of things. Georgian in style, which would mean between, you know, the mid-18th century to ending about the mid-19th century. This was the period of the Georgian aesthetic. And what is also, I found out through walking through the various environs and the parameters of the garrison, so like the vernacular housing, the housing of the people of Harts Gap, Chelsea Road, Darrell's. Some of the houses have actually taken on, in wood, in whatever material they could afford, a look of porticos. They've got the portico, they've got, you know, and they've tried to mirror some of that military simple line symmetry, but now showing up in the Barbadian vernacular. And this is, again, important to me. You cannot just say that history lies inside. In other words, this is the important area within the garrison complex proper. History is also out, and all those homes that border this garrison, those began because they're servicing life of they're servicing the life. The dairy farms were around here, supplying the milk. The washerwomen, the grooms for the horses, they start to build their homes around here to be close to the center of work, especially after the turn of the century. And remember again, when these houses, Block A, Block B, and Block C, were turned into homes for the colonial staff who came here before independence, gardening, in fact, people have described, they said this was very well kept, that the garrison was beautiful. Ethel Cumberbatch, if I may, who 89, so, who lives on King's Village just by Harts Gap, she remembered as a girl that it was beautifully kept with gardens everywhere. And if you saw gardens, then you knew that there were workers here doing that gardening. Which leads me to, you know, I really want to say that again, in this day and age, we don't want to remember necessarily some of the oppression of the past. But the truth of the matter is that the most important thing I can say about these buildings is more of a question. Who built them? We know that every brick, it is the labor of our ancestors that produced, and if it has stood the test of time, if they're still standing, it is because that was work well done. And that must be the positive remembrance here. You are not sinking and holding back in a past. You are looking at the future and what they have left us with their skill and fortitude.
Well, the dossier has been written up and submitted to UNESCO. The possibility exists that Greater Bridgetown and the Garrison area could be inscribed on the prestigious UNESCO Memory of the World Heritage List, to the delight, of course, of Sophia.
Yes, Sherwood, there is excitement, and I think it's to be, you know, commended, because in a sense, I can't comment too much on what UNESCO will bring to the package, but being on the list certainly does mean that we have to safeguard. It does put an onus on us to be more, you know, careful and protective of what is our heritage. However, I will say this. I'm not saying that this is so, but I am looking at the fact that this desire to be on the UNESCO Heritage List, World Heritage List, must not just be for show. It cannot just be because we want to say we are on a list and we can compete with St. Kitts or Dominica. It must be because the people feel and recognize their heritage. If they do not comprehend this as something that is special to them, like tuck, or things that if you say to a Barbadian, do you know tuck band, they may be able to comment because they recognize that. you could say that this is a project that we're doing now to create that awareness, but it should not be so far that we are starting from a baseless foundation. The people should be able to go, oh yes, I know what you're speaking of, or I recall that, or this is what the area means to me. If not, it is empty. And it will mean that in actual truth, we are not doing this for ourselves, but for a market. Again, that is not about the Barbadian people. And again, in my view, another point I'm passionate about is that we need to start understanding who we are.
And perhaps as it relates to the Garrison, we can start to do that by identifying that sacred spot spoken about earlier in the thesis and finding some way of memorializing it so that it might be meaningful to all. But exactly how do we do that?
How can it be that, in fact, there is no markation, there's no mark that suggests something as poignant to us Barbadians? Do we say then that the savannah itself becomes that plaque? Or should we, there is a sense of purpose when you ask a person to go and look, to see, identify, to point, there is where it was. I spoke to so many Barbadians who were here, who did stand and climb the trees. Look, you know, they talk about, even though the rains were pouring, they still came to this garrison. Today, maybe the younger generation, these are some of the issues. They can't see it. And I know we are very lucky to still have maintained our national parade. That is important because it takes place on this spot. That was a little area too that things were, certainly in my estimation, the thought of taking it somewhere else was a no-no. So I'm glad that we have, the powers that be have brought it back to the garrison. But this now leads me into the other changes, again, that are taking place. We know that horse racing is looking either to do two things, change it to night racing or move it altogether. Moving it to St. Philip, I can't argue the point that they would be able to have a larger facility. But again, horse racing has survived here, and surely something can be done to maintain that relationship of time. And it has proven itself to be the thing that Barbadians think about first when they think of the garrison. Whenever I ask them, what do you think of the garrison? Give me two things. Horse racing. So it has proven itself to stand the test of time. If it does stay here, I would be happy for that, and I would have no problem with night racing. Only that, if it means that 28 poles, 75 feet tall, with glaring blue light is going to be shining down every Friday night, and I think we know how developments go. We'll hear that there is a fete later and they need the lights, and the place will constantly be swamped with blue light. That will affect people sleeping in Navy Gardens, and the turtles that are supposed to nest at the beach down by Gravesend. That's an issue, and then that's a change we can't accept. Don't mind the horse racing at night, but if it means radical change that will upset the majority of people living along the coast, and it will, because we've seen the effects of blue lights in St. George at basketball courts, then we cannot do it.
Well, Sophia continues to speak about the changes that occurred here at the Garrison. She lauds the efforts of the Barbados Turf Club and provides at least one alternative solution to a practice that disturbs her.
Some of them have a negative impact and some are positive. They are effective. And I think many Barbadians, if not all of us, are thankful for this, for the Turf Club's creation of the walking track. I hear people have laughed and said, well, it wasn't a walking track, it was for the ambulance. Nonetheless, the walkers, and certainly Barbados, who is now moving towards a greater emphasis on health, that has been a welcome addition. However, new factors are coming in, and this is part of the evolution. You have walkers, but now we have cyclists on the walking path. So that is a little treacherous. We have basketball and the rugby. They play in the center, and their activity doesn't hurt or affect anyone. In recent times, I walk here quite frequently, maybe 3-4 times a week, And a new addition has been car driving tests, learning to drive all over our national parade ground. Now, even though it's dry right now and the car tires may not make an indent into the soil, if it was wet and they continue doing driving lessons near the drill hall, they will create furrows in the ground, and when our parade takes place, our soldiers will be, breaking their legs and feet. So it's just about all of these small aspects of the savannah, and I'm aware of them. And you need to think why. It is not. If you're going to learn to drive, I would suggest, for example, the gymnasium. It's a big space. Not all of it is used, and it has car parking marks that you can reverse into. I do not think that our national parade ground should really take on car learning how to drive. Interestingly, what people have always said about the area and why it is special is that it has retained, over these many long years, decades, centuries, its main look, the original look. You can still see the formation of its beginnings. And still yet, even over the last 25 years, where many more changes have occurred, we're still just about holding on to that authenticity, that original, look. However, funnily enough, in the last 2 years, more changes have taken place in the area than ever before.
Really?
Some more negative than others, in the sense that we have had the baobab tree, that caused a stir because that was chopped down. As we go around the garrison, maybe you'll see that the trees have been severely cut. I may even use the word butchered, when they are a major part of the ambience and look and landscape of the garrison.
And when I'm wrapped up in your embrace, all my years.
Well, the democratization process that occurred here at the garrison is nicely summed up by Sophia, in the words of one of the Caribbean's Nobel laureate.
And there's no denying that the Barbados Garrison historic area does have, to some degree, a contested heritage. How people view it and what, it's going to create issues as to what we're celebrating. Are we going to be highlighting the black skilled workers that built that helped to create the complex by building the structures? Are they going to look at the military aspect? Are they going to throw up the British military presence in Barbados? There are many areas that one could look at this thing that might cause a little jolt. But I'll leave you with an extract from a poem that St. Lucian poet laureate Derek Walcott spoke of, and it's from A Far Cry from Africa. And I just want to read that because I think that is exactly the issue: how to separate the two, our two histories in a pluralistic society. I, who am poisoned with the blood of both, where shall I turn, divided to the vein? I, who have cursed the drunken officer of British rule, how choose I between this Africa and the English tongue I love? Betray them both, or give back what they give? How can I face such slaughter and be cool? How can I turn from Africa and live?
How can I turn from Africa and live? Special thanks to Sophia for sharing her master's degree thesis with all. Thank you so much for staying with me. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been Our Heritage, Sophia's beloved garrison.